Darkness filled the broken starship. The cold metal walls echoed with strange sounds. Small cracks hissed with escaping air, and wires hung like snakes from the ceiling. Inside one corner of the ruined vessel, an alien widow held her child close to her chest. Her arms shook, not because of weakness, but because of fear. Her people had told her stories about humans. Humans were predators. Humans were hunters. They crossed the galaxy, fought wars, and devoured everything in their path. To her people, the word human was not a name, it was a warning, and now one of them was here. Through the broken window of the ship, she had seen the shadow, a tall figure in heavy armor. The strange helmet glowed with a faint red light. Each step he took echoed like thunder in her ears. The child in her arms whimpered softly, and she covered his mouth quickly. If the predator heard them, he would come. He would smell them. He would eat them. That was what she believed. Her heart raced. The ship was too damaged to hide for long. The child was too small to run. There was only one way this story could end. The human entered the wreck. The sound of his boots against the floor sent shivers through her body. The widow pressed her back against the wall, pulling her child tighter. The predator's head turned slowly, scanning the wreck with glowing eyes. His hands rested on the strange weapon strapped to his side. She prayed silently, "Please do not find us. Please spare my child," but humans were predators. They never spared prey. The child made a small sound, half cough, half cry. The human stopped. The glowing eyes turned directly toward the hiding spot. The widow froze. She could feel her child shaking in her arms. The human began walking forward, heavy steps crushing broken metal under his boots. She whispered to her son, "Do not look, do not cry, do not breathe," but children cannot stop being children. His small eyes stared at the predator with fear and wonder. The human stopped just a few steps away. The widow closed her eyes, ready for the strike. She imagined the predator pulling out his weapon, dragging her child away and ending everything in pain and screams. But then, nothing happened. She opened her eyes slowly. The human was kneeling. His weapon was still at his side, untouched. With one hand, he reached into a pouch. From it, he pulled a small pack of food, compressed rations, the kind soldiers carried during war. He placed it gently on the floor and pushed it toward her. The widow did not move. She could not understand. Was this a trick? Was he trying to make her lower her guard? The human said nothing. His voice stayed silent, but his actions spoke louder. He slowly took off his helmet. For the first time, she saw his face, not sharp fangs, not dripping jaws, just a tired man with eyes that carried pain and sorrow. The child looked at the food, then at the human. His little hand stretched out before the widow could stop him. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him back, her eyes burning with fear. But the human did not react. He simply waited. Seconds felt like hours. The ship creaked around them. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Outside, the storm of a ruined planet howled. Yet inside this broken place, there was silence, broken only by the sound of the child's breathing and the slow heartbeat of a terrified mother. Finally, the widow took the food. Her hands trembled. She smelled it, then broke a piece and gave it to her child. The boy ate quickly, hunger stronger than fear. The human watched with calm eyes, but he did not move closer. He simply sat on the floor across from them, his weapon still resting at his side. The widow whispered to herself, "Why? Why are you not what they said?" Her people had told her that humans were beasts, demons in the shape of flesh. But this one had given food, not death. This one had shown patience, not violence. Still, she could not trust him. Not yet. Fear still lived inside her bones, carved deep by the stories of the past. She pulled her child close again, her eyes never leaving the man. The human finally spoke. His voice was low, almost gentle. She could not understand the words, but the tone carried no threat. He pointed at the door, then at her, and then at the storm outside. His meaning was clear. "It is not safe here. I will help." The widow's heart pounded faster. Could she believe him? Or was this just the beginning of a cruel game? The child, however, had already made his choice. He reached out his tiny hand toward the man, his eyes filled with innocent trust. The widow froze again. This was the moment. Would she pull her child back into the shadows of fear, or let him touch the hand of the predator who might not be a predator after all? The human extended his hand slowly, waiting. The ship groaned as if the world itself held its breath. And in that silent, fragile moment, The widow realized that the real danger was not the human before her, but the fear inside her heart. The storm outside roared like a wild beast. Lightning split the sky, and the broken starship shook each time thunder rolled over the dead plains. Inside, the alien widow sat frozen, her arms wrapped tight around her child. Across from her, the human stayed still. He had removed his helmet, showing his face without fear. His eyes were steady, his movements calm, as if he did not want to scare her. But his presence itself was terrifying. Humans were supposed to be killers. Every story she had ever heard told her to run, to hide, to never trust. And yet here he was, not raising his weapon, not baring his teeth. He had given food. He had spoken in a low voice, almost gentle. She could not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. He wanted no fight. The child shifted in her lap. His small eyes followed the human with innocent curiosity. The boy was too young to carry fear the way adults did. He saw only what stood before him, a tall stranger who had shared food. The widow whispered softly in her native tongue, "Stay close, my son. Do not trust the predator." But the child reached out again, tiny fingers stretching toward the human. The man did not move quickly. He slowly extended his hand, stopping halfway, leaving a space. It was not a command, not an order, it was an invitation. He waited, showing patience that surprised her. The widow's heart beat like a drum. Every part of her screamed to pull her son back. But something held her still. Perhaps it was the way the man's eyes softened. Perhaps it was the way he lowered himself, making his giant body less threatening. The boy touched his hand. The widow gasped. Her breath caught in her throat. But the human did not harm him. Instead, he turned his palm upward, letting the boy rest his hand there as if holding something precious. The man even managed a small smile, faint but real. The widow felt her fear shift, not disappear, but tremble. For the first time she wondered, what if the stories were wrong? The storm grew worse outside. A loud crash shook the wreckage and the walls groaned. The human stood quickly, scanning the ship. He tapped his chest plate, then pointed at the door, then at the widow and her child. She understood. He wanted them to follow. Her instinct said no. Leaving her hiding place meant danger, but the ship was breaking. Metal screamed as the storm pushed harder. If they stayed, the wreck would collapse. The human stretched out his hand again, not to the child this time, but to her. His palm was open, waiting. The widow stared at it. Her people said a predator's hand was the last thing prey ever saw. But her child was looking at her, eyes full of trust, as if asking her to believe. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand in his. The human closed his hand around hers, firm but careful, and pulled her gently to her feet. His armor was cold against her skin, but his grip carried strength, not cruelty. They moved together through the ship, the child clinging to her side. The human led the way, scanning every shadow. His weapon was ready now, but not aimed at her, aimed outward, at the dangers beyond, and danger came quickly. From the torn hallway, shadows moved, scavengers, twisted creatures of metal and flesh, drawn by the storm and the smell of weakness. Their claws scraped against the floor, their red eyes glowing in the dark. The widow froze. She had faced these beasts before. They killed without mercy. If they saw her child, it would be over. But the human stepped forward. Without hesitation, he raised his weapon and fired. Bright flashes lit the corridor, thunder inside the storm. The scavengers shrieked, falling one by one. The sound of his gun echoed until only silence remained. Smoke filled the air. The human lowered his weapon, scanning for more threats. Then he turned back to her, his eyes meeting hers, asking a silent question. "Are you safe?" The widow could not speak. Her throat was tight with shock. She had expected death, but instead she had seen protection. She had expected betrayal, but instead she had seen sacrifice. Her child clapped his small hands, laughing at the flashes of light, too young to understand the danger. The widow held him tighter, tears stinging her eyes. Why would a predator risk his life for prey? They moved again, leaving the wreck behind. The storm howled louder, but the human kept them close, shielding them with his armored body. Every step he took was measured, every glance searching for danger. The widow's mind spun. Trust was dangerous, yet without him, she would already be dead. Fear told her he was still a predator, but her heart whispered something different. As they reached the edge of the storm, she looked at him again. His face was tired, scarred, but not cruel. She saw no hunger in his eyes, only pain, Only loss. For the first time, she wondered. Maybe humans were not predators after all. Maybe they were something else. Something harder to name. The child yawned, resting his head against her shoulder, safe for now. The widow tightened her arms around him and whispered, "We live." Because of him. The human walked ahead, silent and steady, not knowing that with each step, the wall of fear inside her was slowly breaking. The storm had finally passed. The sky above was not blue but a dull gray, cracked with floating ash and dust. Ruins of the colony stretched across the land. Broken towers, shattered roads, skeletons of ships left to rust in silence. This world was dead, but it was not empty. The widow held her child close, her eyes scanning every shadow. The human walked a few steps ahead, weapon ready, his armor scratched by battle. Each time the wind howled through the ruins, she flinched. Danger lived everywhere in this place. She remembered the stories told by her people. Humans are hunters, they said. Do not follow them, do not believe them. And yet here she was, walking behind one. Every step was heavy with doubt. Every glance at his back reminded her. He could turn on her at any moment, but he had not. Not yet. The child tugged at her arm and pointed. His small voice murmured, "Safe?" The widow swallowed hard. She did not answer because she did not know. They reached the skeleton of a fallen tower. The human stopped and raised his hand. Instantly, the widow froze, clutching her child. His meaning was clear. Danger ahead. Through the broken walls, shapes moved. Alien raiders. Tall, thin, with armor made of scavenged metal. Their faces were hidden under sharp masks and their weapons glowed with stolen energy. These raiders had no mercy. They killed survivors, stole children, and left nothing behind. The widow's breath caught in her throat. She had seen raiders before. She had seen what they did. Her child whimpered softly, pressing his face into her chest. The human crouched low, scanning the raiders. He motioned for her to stay hidden. His eyes burned with focus, his body ready for battle. The widow wanted to scream. Why fight? Why not run? But the answer came quickly. There was no way around. The raiders blocked the path. If they stayed, they would be found. The human acted first. With sudden speed, he charged into the open. His weapon blazed, shots cutting through the silence. The raiders cried out, their weapons sparking as they fired back. The ruins shook with the force of the fight. The widow pressed her child close, heart pounding in terror. She wanted to look away, but she could not. The human moved like fire, dodging, striking, never letting the raiders close in. Each shot he fired was precise, protecting not himself but the space where she hid. One raider broke through, rushing toward her with a blade. Her scream tore from her throat. But before the blade could fall, the human was there. His body slammed into the attacker, throwing the raider to the ground. The fight was brutal, close, filled with sparks and blood. But in the end, the human stood tall and the raider lay still. The others fled into the shadows, their courage broken. Silence returned. The smell of smoke filled the air. The widow trembled. Her child clung to her neck, sobbing softly. She looked at the human. His armor was burned, his face cut, his breath heavy. Yet his eyes turned not to her with hunger or cruelty, but with a single question. Are you safe? She could not answer. Her voice failed her. They moved again, deeper into the ruins. The sun, or what little of it could pierce the ash, was sinking low. The human led them into an old shelter, half buried under rubble. It was dark, cold, but it kept the wind away. The widow sat with her child, wrapping him in her cloak. She watched as the human set down his weapon and began to build a small fire. His hands were rough, scarred, but careful. The child's fear had softened. He crawled closer to the fire, eyes wide at the dancing light. The human smiled faintly, pulling a small device from his pack. He pressed a button and a hologram flickered. Tiny animals running in circles, a toy from another world. The child laughed. A clear, bright sound in a land of ruin. The widow's chest tightened. She had not heard that laugh since her mate had died. For a moment she saw hope return to her son's eyes. But it was given not by her, not by her people, but by the very predator she was taught to fear. Her mind twisted in confusion. Could she accept this? Could she allow her child to trust what she could not? She looked at the human again. His smile faded as he stared into the fire. His eyes were far away, filled with shadows of his own. Loss, pain, memories he could not escape. The widow whispered to herself, He is not a monster. But what is he? Night fell. The storm outside raged again, but inside the shelter there was warmth. The child slept peacefully at last. His small body curled beside her. The human remained awake, guarding the door, his weapon ready. He did not sleep. He did not lower his guard. Every sound outside made his eyes narrow. Every shadow tested his focus. The widow could not rest. She sat in silence watching him. Each time she blinked, the stories of her people returned. Humans are predators. Humans kill. Humans destroy. But each time she opened her eyes, the truth before her was different. This human had fought for her, not against her. He had bled to protect her child. He had carried pain, but not cruelty. Her heart was torn between fear and something she did not want to name. In the silence of the night, she realized something that made her shiver. The most dangerous thing in this world was not the storm outside, not the raiders, not even the scavengers. The most dangerous thing was the possibility that everything she had believed about humans was wrong. The night stretched long inside the ruined shelter. The fire burned low, its light flickering across the walls. The child slept peacefully, his chest rising and falling with soft breaths. The alien widow sat beside him, her body tired but her eyes wide open. Sleep would not come. Not while the human was here. The man sat near the doorway, his weapon across his knees, his face lit by the dim glow of the fire. He did not close his eyes, not even for a moment. Each sound outside, scraping metal, howling wind, distant echoes made his head turn. He was a soldier even in silence, a predator waiting for danger, and yet he had not harmed them. The widow's mind churned. Fear and doubt warred inside her. He fights for us, but why? Finally, the human turned his head. His eyes met hers. For a long moment, neither spoke. She did not know his words, and he did not know hers. But silence is its own language. Then slowly, he touched his chest. His fingers rested over his heart. He spoke a single word. Family. The widow frowned. She did not understand at first. But then he pulled something from inside his armor. A small broken picture. He held it carefully as if it were more fragile than glass. The widow leaned closer, curious. In the picture were faces, humans like him. A woman, 2 small children. All smiling. All alive once, but now, gone. The widow felt her breath catch. She looked at the man's face, and for the first time, she did not see the predator her people had warned about. She saw grief, pain carved deep into his soul. He was a warrior, yes, but also a father, a husband, a man who had lost everything. The human pointed at himself, then at the picture. His voice was heavy, the sound of sorrow that crossed every language. He tapped the image of the children, then shook his head slowly. No, they were no more. The widow's chest tightened. She knew loss. She had buried her mate, watched her world fall apart, carried her child alone. Pain was a language she understood all too well. For the first time she whispered to him, even though he could not understand. I am like you. The human seemed to sense the meaning. His eyes softened. He placed the picture back in his armor, close to his heart. The fire cracked between them, breaking the silence. The widow remembered her own past. She saw her mate's face in her memory, kind, strong, taken too soon by war. She remembered the night her colony burned, the screams, the chaos, the raiders tearing through everything she loved. She remembered running into the storm with her child, never looking back. She had hated humans then, blamed them for every loss, every war. But now, sitting across from this man, she realized something terrifying. Grief did not belong to one species. Sorrow was shared. The human reached into his pack again. This time he pulled out a small object. A toy. Worn and broken, but still intact. A child's plaything, carried across battlefields, kept as a memory. He set it near the fire, staring at it with a look that made the widow's heart ache. Her child stirred in his sleep, his tiny fingers reaching out. By chance, he touched the toy. The human's eyes glistened, and he quickly wiped at them as if ashamed to show weakness. The widow saw it all. The mask of the predator was gone. What remained was something else. A protector, a parent, someone haunted by failure but still fighting to keep another child safe. Hours passed. The fire grew smaller. The human finally leaned back against the wall, his weapon still close but his body heavy with exhaustion. His eyes closed for the first time since she had met him. The widow stared at him in silence. She studied the scars on his face, the way his chest rose and fell with each slow breath. For so long she had believed humans were only monsters. But monsters did not carry broken pictures of families. Monsters did not cry when children laughed. She whispered to herself, "Maybe. He is more like us than we knew." Her child shifted in his sleep, murmuring softly. She pulled him closer, kissing his head. Then for the first time she looked at the human not with fear but with something else. Something she could not yet name. Dawn came slowly. Pale light seeped through cracks in the shelter. The human woke before the sun had fully risen. He stood stretching, his armor groaning. Without a word, he moved to the doorway, scanning the ruins outside. The widow rose too, gathering her child. She wanted to ask him something, though she had no words he would understand. She wanted to ask why. Why do you protect us? Why risk your life for strangers? But when she looked at him, the answer was already there. Not spoken, not explained, only carried in the weight of his eyes, in the pain of his loss, in the way he had chosen to keep moving forward despite everything. He protected because he could not stop. He protected because once he had failed, and he would not fail again. The widow felt something shift inside her. For the first time since the war, she felt not only fear, not only grief, but a spark of hope. She whispered softly, though he could not understand, "Perhaps you are not predator. Perhaps you are guardian." The human turned back as if he had somehow heard. He gave a small nod, silent but strong, and together they stepped out into the ruins of the world, no longer strangers, but no longer enemies either. The ruins stretched endlessly as they traveled. Crushed towers leaned like broken bones against the sky. Fires from old wars still burned under the surface, glowing faintly in the cracks of the earth. The widow walked with her child in her arms, following the human through the wasteland. For days now he had protected them. He had fought scavengers, shielded them from storms, and shared his food. She had seen his hidden grief, the broken picture of his family. A part of her had begun to trust. But fear never died fully. Fear lived deep inside her bones, and soon fear would test her once more. They entered an old colony hall, its roof torn away, walls covered in ash. It looked empty, too empty. The human raised his hand, signaling silence. The widow froze, clutching her child tighter. The child's eyes darted nervously, sensing the tension. Then came the sound. A sharp whistle. A signal. From the shadows, raiders appeared. Dozens of them. Thin bodies wrapped in armor, faces hidden behind jagged masks, weapons glowing with deadly light. They circled the survivors, blocking every path. The widow's heart pounded. She had seen these raiders before. They did not kill quickly. They captured, enslaved, tortured. Her child whimpered, and she pressed his face against her shoulder, whispering, "Quiet, my little star, quiet." The human raised his weapon. His eyes burned with fire, but there were too many. Even he could not fight them all. A tall raider stepped forward, his mask shining with cruel symbols. He spoke in a language the widow understood. "Alien mother, give us the child. Give us the small one, and we will let you live." Her blood froze. Her arms tightened around her son. She shook her head, whispering, "No, never." The raider laughed. "You cannot fight us. Look around. The human cannot protect you. He will not risk himself for prey." The widow's gaze turned slowly to the man beside her. The raider's words echoed in her mind like poison. He will not risk himself. He is predator. He is hunter. Her fear returned like a storm. She had trusted too much. She had let her guard fall. Now she was trapped, and her child was in danger. What if the raider was right? What if the human had only been waiting for this moment? What if he gave them her son in exchange for his own life? Her people's stories filled her mind again. Humans will betray. Humans will eat. Humans will always choose themselves. The raiders closed in. The human stepped forward, weapon ready, but the widow's heart screamed with doubt. Then came the voice, her child's small voice, trembling but clear. "Safe with him." The boy reached his tiny hand toward the human. Even in terror, even surrounded by enemies, the child trusted him. The widow's chest shook. Tears filled her eyes. She had a choice. Trust the human, risk everything, and fight together. Or believe the stories, betray him, and beg the raiders for mercy. Her arms tightened around her child. She turned to the human. For a brief second, their eyes met. She saw no fear in him, no selfish hunger. Only the same fire she had seen every time he fought. Fire not for himself, but for them. Her doubt cracked. Her choice became clear. The raider leader shouted, "Give us the child, alien, or you all die." The widow stood tall, holding her son close. Her voice trembled, but she answered with strength, "No, we do not give him." Not while he still stands, she pointed at the human. The raiders laughed, mocking. But in that moment, the human stepped forward like a shield. His voice thundered, even if she could not understand the words. His meaning was clear. "If you want the child, you go through me." The battle began. The raiders rushed like a wave. Blades flashed, weapons fired. The human fought with fury, his weapon blazing, each strike protecting the space behind him where the widow stood. He took wounds, blood staining his armor, but he did not fall. The widow, for the first time, fought too. She grabbed a fallen raider's blade, her hands shaking but her will strong. She stood beside the human, striking at any who came close to her child. The hall roared with chaos. Sparks flew. Screams echoed. The human roared with pain but never let the raiders break through. At last, the survivors stood in silence among the fallen. The raiders fled, broken and defeated, their leader lying dead at the man's feet. The widow gasped for air, her arms aching, her body trembling. She looked at the human. His armor was shattered, blood ran down his face, but he was still standing, still guarding, still alive. Her son reached toward him again, whispering, "Safe with him." The widow fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she let the truth inside her heart. The human was not predator, not monster, not betrayer. He was protector, and she would never doubt that again. The Hall of Ruins was quiet after the fight, but it was not peace. Smoke drifted between broken walls. The air smelled of fire and blood. The widow held her child tightly, her arms trembling from exhaustion. The human stood nearby, his armor cracked, his face streaked with dust and red wounds. He was alive, but barely. The raiders had fled, but their retreat was not the end. In the distance, the ground shook. The widow felt it under her feet. A low rumble, steady, growing louder. The raiders were not finished. They were calling something. The child whispered, frightened. "Big!" The human's eyes narrowed. He reloaded his weapon, every movement sharp with focus. He looked at the widow and gestured. "Run." She shook her head. "No, not without you." But before another word could pass, the walls cracked. A massive machine crashed through the ruins, a war beast built by raiders from steel and bones of old ships. Its body was a mountain of metal, legs like claws, eyes burning with red fire. Its roar shook the broken colony. The widow froze in terror. She had seen machines like this destroy entire towns. Even armies feared them. The human did not step back. He raised his weapon, his voice hard and steady. He stood alone between the beast and the mother with her child. The widow whispered to herself, "He will die." He cannot win, but still he fought. The machine lunged forward. Its claws ripped the ground, sending stone flying. The human fired, bright blasts striking its metal hide. Sparks flew, but the monster did not slow. The child cried out. The widow covered his eyes, her heart breaking. She wanted to run, to hide, but her feet would not move. She could not leave him. Not after everything. The human rolled aside as a massive claw crashed down, shattering the ground. He fired at the beast's joints, aiming for weakness. Each shot echoed like thunder. But the machine roared louder, unbroken. Then the beast struck. A claw hit the ground near the human, sending him crashing into the wall. His weapon slipped from his hand. His armor cracked further. For a moment he did not move. The widow gasped, her chest tight with despair. No, not now. Not after all. The beast turned toward her and the child. Its red eyes locked on them. It raised its claw, and then the human rose again, bleeding, broken, but alive. He grabbed his weapon, screamed with fury, and ran straight toward the monster. The fight was chaos. The human climbed onto the beast's leg, firing point blank into its joints. Sparks exploded. The machine roared, shaking violently, trying to throw him off. The widow watched in horror and awe. Each strike he made was not for himself. It was for her, for the child, for the promise he carried in his broken heart. The beast slammed against walls, crushing stone, tearing through steel. The human held on, climbing higher, closer to its core. The widow suddenly understood. He was not just fighting. He was willing to die. She could not stand still. Not anymore. She set her child safely behind cover, whispering, "Stay here, little star. Do not move. Then she grabbed a fallen raider's blade and ran toward the fight. The human had reached the beast's chest. He pulled a grenade from his belt, jamming it deep into the machine's burning core. But the monster struck him hard, throwing him across the ground. His body crashed with a sickening sound. The widow screamed. She rushed forward, slashing at the beast's leg with her blade. The strike was weak compared to its size, but it drew the monster's attention away from her child. The machine raised its claw to crush her. At that same moment, the grenade inside the beast's chest exploded. A deafening blast shook the ruins. Fire burst from its body. The monster let out a metallic scream, stumbling back before collapsing in flames. The ground trembled as it fell, the earth cracking beneath its weight. Silence followed. Smoke filled the air. The widow dropped to her knees, coughing, her blade slipping from her hand. She turned, searching wildly. The child was safe, eyes wide with shock but alive. Relief flooded her heart, but then she saw the human. He lay broken on the ground, blood staining the dirt. His chest rose and fell, but weakly. His hand still gripped his weapon, even in pain. His eyes flickered open as she crawled to him, her tears falling onto his armor. She whispered, her voice shaking. Why? Why do this for us? The human's lips moved. His voice was faint, but the word was clear. Family. The widow's heart shattered. She pressed her forehead against his, sobbing. Her child crawled beside her, small hands reaching for the human's arm. The man tried to smile. His body trembled, but his eyes held peace, not fear. He had fought not as predator, not as monster, but as protector, as guardian, as father to a child not his own. The fire of the fallen machine burned in the distance. The storm above had finally broken, light shining weakly through the clouds. The widow held the human's hand tightly, refusing to let go. And in that moment she knew. Her world had changed forever. The predator was gone. The protector remained. Smoke drifted into the gray sky, rising from the burning wreck of the war beast. The ruins were quiet now. No raiders, no scavengers, only silence. The alien widow knelt on the cracked ground, her child pressed against her chest, her eyes locked on the human who lay before them. His armor was broken, his body bleeding, but his chest still rose and fell. Alive. Barely. She touched his face with trembling hands. His skin was warm, his breath shallow. She whispered, voice shaking. Stay with us. Please stay. The child crawled closer, small hands gripping the human's arm. His voice was soft, innocent, safe. With him, the human's eyes fluttered open. Pain filled them, but so did peace. He looked at the widow, then at the child, and whispered the word he had carried since she first met him. Family. The widow's tears fell freely. Her heart ached, not with fear this time, but with something new, something she had not felt since before the war. Hope. The storm outside the ruins had broken. Light pushed through the clouds, thin but steady. For the first time in many cycles, the world did not look like death. It looked like survival. The human tried to rise, his body trembling. The widow placed her hand firmly on his chest. No, she whispered. Rest. She did not know if he understood, but he stopped struggling and let his body sink back down. She looked around the ruins. The raiders were gone, their machine destroyed. But others would come. Survival here was impossible. They could not stay. She met the human's eyes and pointed toward the horizon. She made the word clear with her voice. Together. He blinked slowly, then nodded. The days that followed were hard. The human was wounded, moving slower than before. The widow supported him when his steps faltered. Just as he had once shielded her, their roles had changed, but the bond between them grew stronger with every step. At night they rested in broken shelters, keeping each other warm against the cold. The child curled between them, no longer afraid, no longer crying. To him, the human was not predator. He was protector. He was father. One night, as the firelight flickered, the widow found herself staring at the human's face. His scars no longer frightened her. They told a story, of battles, of loss, of pain endured, but also of strength, of courage, of love for those he had lost. She touched her child's head gently, then whispered words the human would not understand. He saved you. He saved me. He is ours now. The human, half asleep, opened his eyes for a moment. As if he somehow understood, he gave her the faintest smile before drifting back into sleep. The journey led them beyond the dead colony, through cracked plains where nothing grew, and into valleys where rivers still flowed. Life still existed here, hidden away. The widow felt her fear fading with every mile. Where once she saw a predator in every shadow, she now saw possibility. Where once she carried only grief, she now carried a fragile hope. The human taught them simple things. How to signal danger with hand signs, how to find safe paths through ruins, how to listen to the silence because silence could be louder than noise. The widow, in return, taught him her language, small words, simple sounds. He repeated them clumsily, his voice rough, but his effort brought laughter to the child. And that laughter became the music of their nights. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the world in orange light, they reached a high cliff. From there, they could see far into the distance. Beyond the wasteland lay green hills and forests untouched by war. The widow held her child close and felt tears on her cheeks. It was the first time she had seen beauty since her world had fallen apart. The human stood beside her, his body still weak but his eyes strong. He pointed toward the horizon and spoke a single word in her language, learned from her lips. Home. Her breath caught. She turned to him, searching his eyes. She realized then what had already happened. He was no longer stranger, no longer predator, no longer even protector alone. He was family. That night they camped under the open sky. The stars burned bright above, endless and ancient. The widow lay awake, her child sleeping beside her, the human resting nearby. She thought of her people, of the stories she had once believed. They were wrong. Humans were not monsters. They were broken, yes. Dangerous, yes. But not predators of children, not destroyers of all. At least not this one. This one had given her food when she had nothing. He had shielded her child with his life. He had fought battles he could not win and still refused to fall. She leaned closer to him and whispered softly, "Not predator. Not prey. Family." His eyes opened faintly at her words. He did not understand the language fully, but he understood her meaning. He reached out, placed his hand gently over hers, and closed his eyes again with peace. When the morning came, the three of them walked together into the rising light. A widow, her child, and the human who had once been feared as predator. Different species. Different worlds. But bound now by something stronger than fear, stronger than grief. They were survivors. They were guardians, they were family.